What's up, guys? How's it going? You guys are sounding pretty hyped tonight, which is awesome. Anybody excited to be here? Like, for real, 2 days? Like, did anybody have school Monday or Tuesday? It just pretty much got canceled everywhere, right? Yeah, just like life shut down for a minute, and all of a sudden I was having like these PTSD flashbacks to like March 2020. Yeah, right. Nobody wants to go back there again. So who's excited to like be outside of their house and like back in this one? Yeah, just me. Okay, cool. Yeah, a couple of you are. Yeah, good. Hey, anyway, if you don't know me, if you're new here, we just haven't had a chance to meet yet. My name is Brandon. I'm one of the youth pastors here. I love this. And fun fact, no one who's ever been eaten by an alligator has ever survived. And that is why we're okay with this much snow. It tracks. I promise. I promise it tracks. So anyway, hey, we're in this series right now that has nothing to do with anything we're talking about tonight. So I was, trying to write funny things about alligators. I don't know why. Actually, I do know why, but that's a long story. I don't have time for that. All right, so hey, we're in this series called Goals, and we're kind of digging through the book of Nehemiah, and we're talking about what it means to have and pursue God-sized goals and how we accomplish them once we decide what those are. And in the first week, we talked about this. We discovered, I guess, that big difficulties can inspire God-sized goals. How many of you have ever run up against a big difficulty in your own life? Okay, but did you die? Okay, right? Because we make it through the big difficulties, right? All right. The second week, last week, Matthias talked about this. He said that you were designed for God-sized goals. So if we're doing some deductive reasoning here, if big difficulties often inspire God-sized goals and you were designed for God-sized goals, guess what? You were designed to walk through difficulty. Let's just pray right now, right? We'll pass the plate. No, I'm just kidding. Y'all don't even know what that means. So tonight we're going to wrap up this series, and we're going to continue to dig into Nehemiah, and we're going to look at how you can come from that realization, like, man, life is going to be hard, so now what, right? How do I walk through difficulty in my own life, and what can this book from several thousand years ago tell me about life in 2021? So here's the deal. Let me start with this question. Since we've been talking about setting goals, real talk. Who has goals for the year? Resolutions, anybody? A couple of you? Anybody have a resolution to get stronger this year, physically stronger? A couple of you? Okay, I would love to know, okay, Ashley, did you say yes? Yours is one? All right, how are you going to do that? Basketball? All right. Dan, I saw your hand up back there. How are you going to get stronger this year? A sword workout. Yes. That's fencing. Jousting is on a horse, bro. All right, who else? Who else wants to get stronger this year? All right, right here. How are you going to do it? Wrestling? Okay, all right. Like off the top rope kind of stuff? I know, I'm just kidding. All right, and one more, back here, okay? How are you going to get stronger? Weight room. Okay, here's the real question, though. Everyone's like, this is how I'm going to get strong. I want to get stronger. This is how I'm going to do it. But how are you going to know when you've done it? Right? Everyone's like, oh, okay, how? I don't know, right? How are you going to know when you've done it? Here's the truth. I think a lot of times we make New Year's resolutions, right, or goals even, that are, I'm going to get stronger, I'm going to be faster, I'm going to be smarter, I'm not going to eat as much junk food. But those are kind of not the best goals, right, because you don't know when you've done it. Like, let's just say, for example, I decide that I'm not going to eat as much junk food. So what does that mean? I'm going to eat less junk food than I ate last year, like one less junk food than I ate. I don't even know how many junk foods I ate last year. A lot, I assure you. And so, right, like I ate at least 365 junk foods last year. I can guarantee you that. But at any rate, that's one junk food a day. That doesn't seem like that much, but it's a lot. Anyway, I digress. I'm moving on. Goals can be difficult, right? Because 2 weeks ago, we talked about who had goals for the year, and a lot of you raised your hands. And tonight, significantly less of you raised your hand. And do you know why that is? Because we're in the last week of January. And statistically speaking, 75% of people give up on their goals by halfway through January. Also, 84% of all statistics are made up on the spot. I don't know. You tell me. You know why people give up on their goals? Because they're hard. It's difficult. Like, I wanted to run a lot. And you know what happened? My feet hurt. And so I ran less. And they didn't hurt as much. And I liked my life better, and I was nicer to people. Goals are difficult. And I don't know what goals you have right now. Maybe they're spiritual or physical or mental. Maybe they're relational. And maybe they're even God-sized goals. But whatever you have, whatever goals you have right now, I've got good news and I've got bad news. And the bad news is this. Goals are hard. The end. But the good news is this, that there's hope when your goals are too much to handle on your own. When things get difficult, you feel weak or discouraged, how do we pursue? How do we keep pursuing those God-sized goals and finish strong? And that's what we're going to look at tonight in the book of Nehemiah. But before we do that, we're going to jump into a little recap so far about where we've been in this story. So, curtain opens up. Nehemiah finds out the walls of his hometown have been wrecked, and he's heartbroken. All right, he's the cupbearer for the king, meaning that he had regular direct access to this guy. Like, he's like, here's your wine, sir. It's not poison, I promise. And the king's like, great. And then he didn't die because it wasn't poison, because Nehemiah would have died if it was. And so then Nehemiah comes into the king one day, and he's sad. And this is the first time the king has ever seen him sad, ever. And so the king's like, hey, man, what's up with your face? And Nehemiah's like, what's up with your face? Just kidding, he didn't say that. He says, my home has been destroyed, and I really want to do something about it. So the king's like, cool, how long will it take? And Nehemiah says, it's going to take exactly until it's done. And the king's like, cool, what else do you need? And he's like, oh, I don't know, spitballing here. Like, I could use like a bunch of money, some protection, maybe some trees and some rocks so I can build this stuff up. And the king's like, awesome, take what you need. We'll see you when you see you. Nehemiah goes to Jerusalem, he inspects the walls, and they are wrecked. And he begins to build a team. Congratulations, you're all caught up. When we get to Nehemiah chapter 3 is kind of where we're going to start at tonight, but I'm not going to read that whole thing because it sounds a lot like this. It says, Elishab, the high priest, and his fellow priests went to work and rebuilt the wall and the sheep gate. They dedicated it, set its doors into place, building as far as the Tower of the 100, and blah, blah, blah. And then it keeps repeating that with different people at different gates doing different things. Okay? It's a lot of details, a lot of people, a lot of names I can't pronounce. So instead of embarrassing myself and trying to read that entire chapter, you should do that on your own. Here's the deal. People come together, they get it rolling. Stuff's being rebuilt, beams are being set, bars, bolts are being installed. They're getting this work done. And if you read this chapter, you might wonder why all these boring details are in the Bible, okay? Because literally it is that same pattern over and over with a different person, different gate, rinse and repeat, second verse, same as the first, a little bit louder, a little bit worse. And so it continues on, but here's why that's so important. This shows me that there were tons of people involved in this project. There were so many people involved in this project. Nehemiah built a team of people that he could trust and that were committed to the goal. Because this was not a project that Nehemiah could have ever done on his own. If he set out to rebuild the city gates by himself, it would not have been finished ever, period, the end. It was too big of a job for one person. So we get this team. The party starts rolling, everything's going great, and then things take a turn. Chapter 4, verse 1 starts like this. It says, when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and was greatly incensed. All right, that's a Bible word that means real mad. He ridiculed the Jews, and in the presence of his associates and the army of Samaria, he said, what are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring stones back to life from these heaps of rubble, burned as they are? Tobiah the Amorite, who was at his side, said, what are they building? Even a fox climbing up on it would break down their wall of stones. So, man, these guys are just roasting Nehemiah and his people. He's like, you guys are the worst. Like, if anybody breathes on that thing funny, it's coming down. Like, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. If you want to talk about biblical bullying, like this is a picture of it. Sanballat, Tobiah, all these guys are just like, why are you wasting your time? Why are you doing something that is so dumb? Like the walls are burned, it's worthless, it's pointless. Just give up. They called him weak, they mocked the quality of their work. If any of them in that squad of wall rebuilding were threes, that would have really hurt their feelings. They mocked their beliefs, they tried to crush their hope. And even though Nehemiah and his team were being obedient to God, they still had to deal with these haters, okay? I would actually argue because they were being obedient to God, they had to deal with these haters, okay? So bonus lesson of the night, not in my notes. If you're dealing with haters, maybe you're like right where God wants you to be. And if you're not dealing with haters, maybe you should take a look at your life because you're too easy to get along with. Sorry, not sorry. Anyway, so let's see how Nehemiah, don't tell your parents I said that. Just kidding. Maybe you should. So let's see how Nehemiah and his team kind of handle this situation, right? Because they're up against it. And the story continues in verse 4. It says, "Hear us, our God, for we are despised." It's like, ouch. Hey, listen, God, we're being hated right now. And God's like, yeah, I see that. Same page. And so Nehemiah continues. He said, "Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as plunder in the land of captivity. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults in the face of the builders." It's like, hey, God, you just want to blow them up or it's lightning or something? I don't know. Just you choose your own adventure, but just deal with all of this so we can get back to this work. And verse 6 says, "So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half of its original height, for the people worked with all their heart." Man, have you ever been up against it? Like someone is just trashing you and telling you that what you do doesn't matter? And sometimes that lands on you a little heavy. Maybe you want to give up, maybe you want to quit, maybe you want to walk away. Not these guys. It says the people worked with all their heart. They pressed in, they leaned in, they kept going. And there's so much that we could talk about here, but there's a few quick things I want you to notice. And the first is this: Nehemiah didn't get distracted. He didn't get distracted. He had these people, and it says that Sanballat and Tobiah, but it also says that there was they were with the Sumerian army. There's thousands of people that are chanting these "you stink," you know what I mean? "Get off the wall," all this stuff. And yet they didn't get distracted by all the noise. And there's a lot of noise right now. So much noise. Wherever you go, whether it's school, home, work, social media, wherever you go, there's so much noise. And guys, if we get distracted by the noise, then we're never going to finish the work that God has called us to. The second thing is this: Nehemiah took it to God. He asked God to hear his prayers and make it right. And he wasn't afraid to be honest with God about what he was feeling. Nehemiah wasn't like, "God, can you just drown him out and make him go away peacefully?" He's like, "No, Lord, these guys are making me angry and I don't like them, and I wish that you would just make them feel the way that we're feeling, and then they would go away crying and they would call their moms and maybe have a heart-to-heart conversation and think about their decisions." That's all in there. But at any rate, he took it to God. He didn't come down from his work. And a lot of times I think we feel like as Christians, as people who are doing what God's called us to do, that it's our job to defend ourselves, but it's not. It's our job to take it to God and let him do his job so we can do ours. Man, somebody get excited about what God's doing, right? Come on. The last thing is this: he kept going. Nehemiah kept going. He and his team kept building no matter what those guys had to say. They rebuilt the wall to half of its original height, and everyone poured their hearts into it. This is amazing. You know how hard it is to get a team together to do a thing? It's hard. If he's like, "Hey, we're going to rebuild this wall," I guarantee you that there were 37 people right then that were like, "All right, I have a plan." And all 37 of those plans were very different. And everybody who had a plan was very passionate about his or her plan and had a lot of reasons why everyone else's plans were dumb and their plans were the right way, right? And so that alone, the fact that they even started the work is amazing. But then there were these distractions and these bullies and these people who said, "You don't matter, what you do doesn't matter, and you're going to fail." And yet, what did they do? They kept going. And they worked at it with all of their heart. Let's see how it continues. Verse 7 says this: "But when Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the people of Ashdod heard that the repairs of Jerusalem's walls had gone ahead and the gaps were being closed, they were very angry." You guys see that this posse keeps growing? The haters don't stop. They multiply. They all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and stir up trouble against it. It says, "But we prayed to our God and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat. Meanwhile, the people in Judah said, 'The strength of the laborers is giving out.'" So Judah is the Israelites. These are the good guys that are building the wall. The people said, the strength of the laborers is giving out, and there is so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall. They're starting to get tired, and they're starting to consider giving up. Verse 11 says, also our enemies said, before they know it or see us, we will be right there among them and will kill them and put an end to the work. So if they can't discourage you, they're going to get in your face, right? These guys are like, we can't get them to stop by our mean words. Let's fight them. Then the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times over, wherever you turn, they will attack us. People are starting to get afraid. People are starting to be fearful. Nehemiah, therefore I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall at the exposed places, posting them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. After I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the peoples, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your families, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. Here's the deal. You'll do something because it's the right thing to do to a certain extent. But man, I bet these people were like, we'll fight for our countrymen, but we'll die for our families. Talk about new resolve. When our enemies heard that we were aware of their plot and that God had frustrated it, what did they do? We all returned to the wall, each to our own work. From that day on, half of my men did the work while the other half were equipped with spears, shields, bows, and armor. The officers posted themselves behind all the people of Judah who were building the wall. Those who carried materials did their work with one hand and a weapon in the other. And each of the builders wore his sword at his side as he worked. But the man who sounded the trumpet stayed with me. This is like a watchman who would say like, oh, the bad guys are coming. And everybody would drop what they're doing, pull this aforementioned sword and be ready to fight. He stayed with Nehemiah and said, then I said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, the work is extensive and spread out, and we are widely separated from each other along the wall. Whenever you hear the sound of the trumpet, join us there. Our God will fight for us. So what do? So we continued the work with half the men holding spears from the first light of dawn till the stars came out. At that time, I also said to the people, have every man and his helper stay inside Jerusalem at night so they can serve us as guards by night and as workers by day. Neither I nor my brothers nor my men nor the guards with me took off our clothes. Each had his weapon, even when we went for water. They stayed ready. You see this? He's like, we never took off our clothes. You ever get home from school and the first thing you do is just put on workout clothes? Every day. As soon as I get home from work, I'm like, the jeans go off, the sweatpants come on, and I sit on the couch and it's glorious. Nehemiah's like, we ain't have time for that. You know what we're sleeping in? Our armor. Because we're staying ready. So here's what happened. After so much opposition, the strength of Nehemiah's team was given out. The bullies were relentless, but Nehemiah was committed and he was strategic. So here's what he did. 4-step plan from Nehemiah. He took it to God again. He was in constant communication with God since the very beginning, and this moment was no different. He took it right back to God. He said, God, it's getting worse. What are you going to do? And God's like, you know what? I got this. Just stay ready. The second thing is this. He prioritized rest. He knew that his team needed rest if they were going to have strength to keep going. So he found a way for them to kind of work in shifts. He's like, you guys build a wall. You guys stand guard. If anything goes down, we're all going to fight, and then we'll switch places, and everything's going to be great. He prioritized rest. Next, he chose community. See, Nehemiah's team was committed to supporting each other, and he put them in tight-knit communities like families so that they would fight the more harder. And finally, Nehemiah kept going again. He never stopped, never stopping. That's a really obscure reference, and I apologize. All right. I wish I could tell you that the opposition ended there, and that once you commit to doing these things, it's all going to be rainbows and butterflies, and everything you put your hand to is going to become a giant wall around a city very quickly, but that's not what happened. In Nehemiah 6, it says this. It says, when word came to Sanballat, Tobiah, Gershom, all those people, the rest of our enemies, that I had rebuilt the wall and not a gap in it was left. This is 52 days later, okay? 52 days it took them to rebuild the wall, a task that was, quote unquote, impossible. They did it in a month and a half. It says that not a gap was left in it. He says, though up to that time I had not set the doors and gates, Sanballat and Geshem sent me this message. Come, let us meet together in one of the villages on the plain of Ono. And Nehemiah said, cool, I'll bring tea. No. He says this, but they were scheming to harm me. You think? So I sent messengers to them with this reply. This is fire right here. This is like one of my favorite verses in all of it. He says this, I am carrying on a great project and I cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you? 4 times they sent me the same message, and each time I gave them the same answer. Then the 5th time, Sanballat sent his aide to me with the same message, and in his hand was an unsealed letter in which was written, it is reported among the nations, and Geshem says it is true, that you and the Jews are plotting to revolt, and therefore you are building the wall. Moreover, according to these reports, you are about to become their king, and have even appointed prophets to make this proclamation about you in Jerusalem. There is a king in Judah. Now this report will get back to the king. So come, let us meet together. They're threatening them. And Nehemiah sent this reply. Nothing like what you are saying is happening. You are just making it up in your head. So Nehemiah is receiving these letters and death threats. These men did not want Nehemiah to finish this wall. But Nehemiah is like, I am doing a great work. I cannot come down. Okay? In today's terminology, that would sound more like, I don't have time for your drama, your political nonsense, your hatred, or your stupidity. What I am doing is important, and I don't have time to deal with you. Love always, Nehemiah. And they come back and they're like, yeah, well, we're telling. And Nehemiah responds like this. Verse 9, it says, they were all trying to frighten us, thinking their hands will get too weak for the work and it will not be completed. But I prayed, now, strengthen my hands. I kind of hear it like this. Lord, strengthen my hands against these people, right? Like that's what I think that he said. Strengthen my hands is what Nehemiah prayed. He could have asked God for anything, but he simply asked for the strength to finish the job, to get it done. Hundreds of years after Nehemiah lived, there was another man with a God-sized goal, and that goal was to spread the message of Jesus to the whole world. His name was Paul, and he was one of the leaders of the early church. He was a prophet, a church planter. He wrote 2/3 of the New Testament, and part of that writing was a letter to a young man named Timothy, who Paul was kind of mentoring up in to be like great in ministry. At this point, Timothy was a pastor in a church, and Paul had written him a couple letters, and this is part of the second letter. And this is, so it's 2 Timothy 1:7. It says this, for God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline. And I don't know this, but I can't help but think that Paul had Nehemiah's story in mind when he kind of wrote these words. And he looked at Nehemiah's example and was like, man, that guy never gave up. That guy had power. He didn't have fear or timidity, but he had power from God. He had love for the people that God had called him to, and he had the self-discipline to get the work done. And Paul encourages Timothy to do the same thing. We all know what it's like to face obstacles, and this is never more true than when we're chasing God-sized goals. And although God never promises the process will be easy, here's what we are promised: that we don't need to be afraid, that God's Spirit will fill us, and God will give us strength. Along with strength, Paul mentioned love and self-discipline as well. And when God gives us God-sized goals, the challenge and opposition we face can be a gift. What? You know why? Does anybody have that goal to get stronger? They're going to lift weights. Do you know what makes you stronger from lifting weights? The resistance, the opposition to the force that you're applying to the weights. Without it, weightlifting would be easy, right? And everyone would do it. But no one would get any stronger. Opposition is a gift from God. It strengthens our faith muscles. It helps us grow in love, and it helps us develop grit. Just like Nehemiah planned to experience opposition. Hear that? He planned. He knew it was going to happen. We should expect to face difficulties when we're pursuing God-sized goals, but here's the good news. No matter what the world throws at us, God gives us the strength to pursue God-sized goals. Sometimes it seems like our challenges become the most difficult just before we cross the finish line. And that was certainly true for this guy named Derek Redmond. He was a runner who competed in the 92 Olympics. He planned, he prepared, and he trained hard. Check out what happened to him in his race. Man, 250 meters before the finish line, he tore his hamstring and couldn't finish the race. And if you could have heard the original commentary, he was closing in on the leader, like he had a real shot, and he tore his hamstring and couldn't finish it. But his father came out of the crowd, wrapped him up, and helped him finish the race. And the truth is, if you are willing to lean into the Father, He will always help you finish the race. At some point, you're going to face opposition that threatens to keep you from achieving your goals. Opposition can feel overwhelming, especially if you're alone. But when you're following Jesus and chasing God-sized goals, you're never alone. God is with you. God is our Father who's willing to step into the problems and challenges and carry us forward. God gives you strength, and He'll even carry you when you can't keep going on your own. So a few minutes ago, we saw how Nehemiah handled opposition. Now, what if we took those same tactics and applied them to our own goals? Think about one of your goals. Keep it in mind, whether it's a you goal or a God-sized goal. Think about the opposition that you're facing. When you need strength to pursue God-sized goals, first thing we need to do is take it to God. Nehemiah was constant in this. This was especially true when he was facing the opposition. So when you're struggling with your goals, man, take it to God regularly. What if you asked Him to help you? What have you asked Him for? And if you knew He'd show up, what would you ask for? Or what would you say? Man, just take it to God. Be honest with Him. Next, choose community. We try to help you guys build that in every week, like giving you time to go hang out with your small group and your leaders. Man, community is such a powerful tool to help you achieve your goals. Nehemiah could not have done this on his own. From a strictly human perspective, even the team that he assembled shouldn't have been able to pull it off. But what we can do in community is so much bigger and better than what we can do alone. The next thing is this: rest. Man, is anybody tired? Right? Take some time to rest. Take some time to just be with God from time to time. Every morning on our Instagram, we're actually posting a quick devotional that really helps us learn the rhythms of when it's time to run and when it's time to rest. And I'd encourage you guys to get to engage with that and just spend some time each day resting in God's presence and knowing that He's with you. Next, don't get distracted. Don't get distracted. I know that just by saying, hey, there's a devotional on Instagram, like just finding that can be distracting. Self-discipline is a great thing, Don't get distracted. Fight for what's important. And man, just keep going. Don't give up. The question is not if opposition will come, it's when. Opposition will come. You will face difficult times. Scripture says that in this world you will have trouble. But Jesus promises, he says, take heart because I have overcome the world. Keep going. Don't get distracted. If you trust God and let the Father carry you through, you can keep going. God, you're good. Man, we love you. We just thank you for who you are. Jesus, we've been called to such big things. We've been called to so much. And God, we just pray for the strength to keep going. We pray for the focus so we don't get distracted. God, we pray for true community. We pray that you'll give us the rest that you've promised. And God, we thank you that you're always there. You're always available, and we can bring you our struggles. We can bring you our positions, and we can bring you our problems, and you're faithful to carry us through. In your name we pray. Amen.